Hello, everyone, and welcome to Horror Night Oasis, a radio show where we discuss all the latest movies and news from the world of horror. Joining me tonight, as always, for a round of hamburgers and French fries is my co-host Ian. Ian, are you there?
Barely.
No, I'm not here, you man. It's one of those times. But we are here to continue on our Independence Horror Marathon, and boy, do we have a doozy for tonight's episode. One that honestly is the epitome of indie filmmaking and indie horror. We haven't had one of these in a while, which we'll probably discuss a little bit later on once we get into the details of everything. But yeah, this a little background on the film before we get into the main thing is our film that we're discussing is Umbilicult, or Tyler Deadend's Umbilicult. And there's not really too much info out there. There's a small trailer, this is a lot of DIY stuff. This is just, we'll get into it. But yeah, I stumbled across this on Etsy of all places, and it was one that sounded interesting. And you know me, I like to support indie horror, and once I found this and came across of it, I purchased it, and here we are tonight reviewing it with again. I figured something like this doesn't get a lot of recognition. It's kind of under the radar. There might be like a few reviews on Letterboxd, but nothing too in depth. And I figured tonight would be a perfect, the Independence Marathon would be a perfect time to give it its props and talk about the film in more detail than just a written review. And I guess we'll just go into it. This is Tyler Deadend's Umbilicult. And so I'm going to go ahead and give fair warning. Like I said with Final Cut, you have to be a very specific person to really get into this film. This is, as I said, you really have to be dedicated to indie horror for a film like this. This isn't just get a bunch of people together and shoot it on weekends. No, this is a passion project with one man, one camera, and one idea. This is a one-person project. Umbilicult is. So, fair warning before I get into the film, and then before we get into the main details of everything. So Umbilicult, where we are introduced to four girls. They're in college. We have Ellie, Carmen, our main character Dee, and Adeline. So they're sort of, they're friendly, but they're not really doing well in their English class. And basically, their professor says, if you want to have a passing grade, I need an essay over the weekend on a famous family in the state. And so they go to the library and they start looking into things, and they can't come across anything. And then Dee comes across this book that details a family called the Barrelows and how they've been in power and just this legacy for about 100 years. And so they decide to go to the town, which is 3 hours away. Once they get there, they have to stop off because Dee's character, she's having her time of the month. And so she needs to get women's needs. So she stops off, and then they're talking to the clerk, and the clerk's like saying, hey, listen, we just leave the family alone. I can't give you any information because they're wanting information where to find the Barrelows. And he's like telling them, like, you listen, just leave town. There's no reason for you here. And the customer directory, which has the address book, and they proceed to go to the house of the Barrelows, which is in the middle, like 2 miles from the convenience store. And once they get there, they sort of come across Prudence and her children, and soon bizarre things start to happen. And a little backstory on Prudence is the beginning of the film. We're introduced to Prudence and Alonzo, and this is 30 years prior the events that's taking place now, where Prudence and Alonzo are they went out on a date, and Prudence is pretty straightforward in her becoming, and her and Alonzo the elope in a pretty graphic way, but not like triple X graphic. It's graphic though, where you have fake dildos and fake vaginas intermittent together.
Wow.
So, and then after the intercourse happens between Prudence and Alonzo, Prudence in recites a curse, and as soon as Alonzo confesses his love to Prudence, she automatically gives birth to 5 babies. And that sets up the events again, 30 years prior to where we are in the film. And then that is where we're introduced again to Prudence, and then Dee and Ellie are kidnapped, I believe, by Prudence and her sons, and Adeline leaves because she doesn't think anyone's there. So she just, and plus they're kind of, Ellie and Adeline sort of have a back and forth constantly because they're always sort of bitching at one another. Just a lot of pertinent things like that, where like she's getting pissed off because she has Tasmanian Devil on a T-shirt and everything like that. It's stupid conversations like that, but it's just like they're not friends, even though they're friends. Just the bitch of the group, Ellie is. And so from that point on, we have basically Prudence has held Dee and another girl hostage, and is just holding them there, and proceeds to tell her the lineage of the Barrowlows, and introduce them to her 5 sons, which again, I don't want to give it away, but as you can probably tell by the poster of the film, they're still connected in a certain area. That is the gist of the movie without really getting into too much detail, because I don't want to get too much out there at the moment. So here's the thing. As I mentioned prior before starting the review, this is a one man, one camera, one idea project. So with that, to what that entails is this is Tyler Deadend wearing masks, standing in front of a green screen, and proceeding to make the film himself in playing every character. Every conversation is AI advanced, where he's putting the command into an AI, and the words are being prompted in a AI voice. So there's no spoken dialogue by Tyler. It is all AI. So Prudence is, I believe, voiced by an Oprah AI, and then one of the kids is which one was it? Eugene? No, it wasn't Eugene. It was Sebastian, that was voiced by an AI Ryan Reynolds. So that is how this film is. And so it's basically, again, Tyler in front of a green screen, imposed background, emoting with an AI voiceover. So this is, like I said, the epitome of do it yourself. And it has been a while since we've had something like this. And the one that comes to mind right off the top is Nazi Zombie Carnage, which we reviewed on the show. It might be uploaded. I don't know if that's one we have on the channel or not. You have to go back and check. I think it is. But that is the 3-hour passion project that was like a World War II zombie epic, where it's like a lot of political stuff, messages in there too. And that was the thing. It was like 3 hours long, but it was done by one person, maybe a few people to help with the puppetry and the stick zombies. But it's just, again, it's that type of mentality that we're looking at, where it's just a passion project with this particular idea. And did it come off as good? It has its problems. I mean, with all, again, forthcoming, I mean, the AI prompts are kind of noticeable. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, when AI is being used, there's a lot of uh, words that's not spoken correctly, but he's making do with what he has and what he wants to portray as the film progresses. And
Yeah.
he's given, again, he's making do with the prompts. Um, and again, you can't, it's no fault of his own. It's just, it is what it is. And but the story is like the main thing. Like, if you can get past the masks and the see, the green screen background, and like, is the story good? And I would say it's decent. It has a solid idea that I liked. I just wish it went into it a little bit further, because I expected that he wanted this to be some sort of like low, you know, sort of lowbrow, gross out type of ordeal, where it's just, he wanted to be a little bit, gross here and there, and like, but the only thing that I felt was like kind of gross in the film was like some of this, the dialogue, like, is your cooter bleeding, stuff like that. Like, what's the other one? The tallywhacker's aching for bacon, stuff like that, where it's just like, just a bunch of just like gross dialogue, and not really exactly gross in the sense of what's happening on screen. And again, when you're trying to do it with one person, it becomes rather difficult with what you want your idea to become. Um, but he tried. That's the thing. Like, he tried, and it it just didn't come out as best as it could have. Because again,
Yeah.
it's a lot of just like longing shots, just waiting for the next AI dialogue prompt to come along. And so there's these little breaks in between where it's just supposed to be keeping like this momentum going, and it just kind of, you start to gain that momentum, and then it just sort of breaks off, and then you're back to the start, just waiting for this more build up to happen of what's going to happen with Prudence and her sons. And then it ultimately, you don't really get fulfilled that much. Like, you can see where it's going, like as soon as a certain plot point happens. I mean, it's fairly obvious. And I just kind of wished it was a little bit more gross, or just like violent, because it's, but when you're doing it with one person, I mean, I understand it's difficult, but it needed to push the envelope just a little bit further. It just felt like it was a little bit restrained in that regard. And I like the story, and I like the idea of everything, and like how, again, characters are still connected, uh, and like, I just wished it was like a little bit more like, what was the end goal of like having the girls kidnapped, between, besides just having them hostage. It didn't seem like there was like any like really build up to anything, to where it ultimately led to. It just seemed like Prudence was just always in the chair, and like nothing like really dangerous was like gonna happen at the moment. um like, she said she was gonna kill them, yeah, I get that, but there needed to be like something else to like continue on, like what they're gonna go on, what they're gonna do to the characters. um
Right.
but Ian, I'll let you give your thoughts, and then we'll go a little bit more back and forth.
No, I trying to think of how to word everything. I mean, it's cool that he could do this by himself. He saw, like, you know what? I want to do this. I have an idea. Let me just try this out. Um I the the one-liners kind of got a little old after a while, because I just kind of felt like it was just
shoehorned.
yeah, like I felt like I was watching Class of '09. I don't know if that might be a little too niche for everybody, but uh, it's kind of just like that where it's just constant just like trying to be offensive, saying like one-liners and stuff like that. That's kind of thinking of that. And I didn't know that it was AI going into it. And I was just like, man, they're really like monotoned, saying all of their lines. And I was like, man. So that would explain that. So I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But yeah, no, it wasn't the best thing I've watched, but then again, it's really hard to when you're the only person and you're doing a lot of prompts. And I think a lot of it was the monotone of the AI voices, which is not like, you got to use what you got to use to try to get your vision out there. Stuff like this is what's used to help fund the next project. So it is what it is. But I kept finding it hard to like really get into it because of it. I thought the masks were kind of interesting. I figured it was just one person, doing that just to show that there's other people. And honestly, the concept of it, of like they're all still like connected with an umbilical cord. That wasn't that was a interesting plot device for it, and I was kind of curious of how the name of this movie was going to be played into it, and I thought it was interesting how he brought that about. Um, but it was okay. I mean, there's not really a whole lot to like that about this film that just to like dig your teeth into, like nothing really to like super harp on or give it a lot of praising other than the fact that like kudos to somebody who actually went out and did what they wanted to do. Like, and I always applaud that because you know it's sometimes we get stuck in our own little heads and it's hard to make our dreams a reality, and this guy did it. And this was definitely a passion project. He definitely went in and had an idea of what he wanted to do. um the gross out stuff was kind of funny, but it did start playing out after a while, where it was just kind of like um I was getting almost a little bit of I don't know. I kind of started getting a little bit of a vibes of the Greasy Strangler with some of the dialogue and stuff.
Mm.
I don't know. That movie popped in my head when I was watching it, but eh.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, you have to give him props for going out there and making his idea a reality, no matter what. Like he was like, I got this. I'm gonna do this, and not he put his best foot forward, and like again,
Yeah.
he tried. He got it out there and he tried. I mean, again, you have to applaud that mentality. But like I said, as a whole, it's just like again, I dug the story, I dug the concept. Again, I'm okay with you know stuff like that where it's like green screen. There's another film that like used that was like green screen heavy with someone standing in front of it. What was it? Lichen Colony did that towards the last act. But that was again, that's Lichen Colony. That's a whole nother ordeal. But it's just like I remember like the last act of Lichen Colony was like all green screen, and this one's again more prepared than Lichen Colony. Um, but uh, again, I'm going off track there. But I just remembered that whole CGI green screen moment with Lichen Colony. But yeah, like the story was fine. The masks, I mean, you had to. I kind of wish like he went for different hair colors. I mean, because there's two black hairs and it's shot in black. It's a black and white film to again hide everything because again it's masks, so it's like you can see the bottom of his neck um, from all the masks and stuff. So it's like you really have to take like your mindset and just really put it down. You really have to. I wouldn't say grin and bear it, but it's just like one of those where like you really have to have the mentality to like understand where this film's coming from. You can't just go into it if you watch nothing but like mainstream Hollywood horror, like even Hollywood indie stuff. This is again, as I said, the epitome of do it yourself. This is just a guy wearing a mask in front of a camera, in front of a green screen, doing it himself. And again, it's not like I said, I'll go back to Nazi Zombie Carnage. It's like not as grand in scale as Nazi Zombie Carnage, where like he had like puppets and army outfits and like, the guns and everything else to make, the grandest scope with Nazi Zombie Carnage being a World War II film and everything, the Grim Reaper and stuff like that in that film. So it's like not as grand as scale. This one is toned down, intimate setting with again everything happening in this one room of the house. And again, as you mentioned, the gross out humor, it just wasn't as like again, I knew the expectations going in. That I was like, okay, this is a one person passion project. Just him wearing a mask in front of a camera. I didn't know exactly what type of tone he was going for. And then, so again, I expected it to be a little sort of gross out, a little bit, gross out comedy. I just expected a little more in that regard. They did mention like one of the sons of Prudence they were having an inbred relationship. I felt that was kind of just like shoehorned in there between the brothers and like everything else that was going
Yeah,
on.
that was weird.
Yeah, like it's fine for what it was, but it's just like it needed a little bit more substance to make that work. Because it seems like all the brothers are like hunky dory with each other, and then all of a sudden they just got pitted against one another for some reason because of Dee and Sebastian falling in love. And so it's just like it just felt like they needed a little bit more between the brothers would have been okay. Besides them just dancing again, they break out in the song occasionally and dance around, and of course hamburgers and French fries. God bless hamburgers and French fries. But
right,
it's one of those where you really just like you really have to enjoy low budget horror to really find the time to give this a watch. And again, do I suggest it? I mean, if you're interested in the show, like if you're interested like we are in the show, you want to give everything its due to just desserts. Yeah, I mean, if you want to support true independent filmmaking, I say go give it a shot. It's an interesting watch. I will say that. It doesn't exactly hit the mark as I kind of hoped it would have, with what it was, the story involved and everything that it was being set up to be. I expected something more, a little bit more grandeur to the conclusion. Besides just what happens at the beginning happens at the end. I just expected just a little bit more to it. With like, what are you going to do with all the, with the characters being held hostage and stuff. But again, you're making do with what you have, and like it's like if me and you and Ian, me and you, Ian, we just got together and we just like, well, we don't have no money, we have this green screen, let's see what we can churn out. Let's try to make something for 30 minutes, and we just,
yeah,
we just have fun and just like throw random shit at a wall and see what sticks. It's just like this. It's sort of like the mentality of this one, but like there's at least a general idea of the film. And again, I liked the idea. I liked the again, because you don't really have too many films like that where mother and son are still connected. you know, uh,
Right.
you have like your killer babies and stuff like that where like they come crawling out or crawling in the womb, but like nothing where it's still still the umbilical cord or the love lock. Wasn't it called the love lock? Is still attached. And again, I just they tried to give the brothers some personality traits. Like Anthony was Ant Titties because he just wanted to be called Ant Titties. Uh, Sebastian, no, which one was it? Eugene. He's the one that liked to go to the bathroom and masturbate. So like they try to give like, or was he? No, Herbert was the one that has intercourse with his mom still. Um, so it's just like again they try to give him some different traits and personalities, um, but they don't really. Again, it's implied. I mean, they don't really do that much with it. It's just like, hey, this is who we are, and it's just like an introduction to the characters because they all wear the same mask and they all look the same besides the T-shirt with their name written on it. And so they're trying to again give a little bit more scale to the film that it doesn't exactly have to show for. And he's doing his best. And again, you have to give him props. Just as a film as a whole, as I said, like the AI prompts and just the breaking points in between is just like you get everything started to build up, as I said, and then it just like again cuts off where you're like, man, we were starting to go somewhere, and then it's just like sometimes those prompts just doesn't help, and it kind of it didn't really make the film drag because it did go on where you're kind of like, okay, I'm interested to see where this progresses, but it's just like it didn't keep the I don't want to say conversation, but the dialogue just like kept breaking off. Like, man, we were going somewhere, and then we're back to square one. And again, that's no fault on Tyler. I don't give that on him. It's just the prompts. It just makes it hard to really dig your teeth into the film as it's going on. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a watchable effort. It just doesn't exactly pull you in as it should with the concept's good, but it just doesn't grasp you as it should.
Yeah. 100% agree. Yeah. When it comes to these movies, I never try to have a high expectation on what we're getting because we never know what we're in for. Um, the concept was interesting. I liked that they were still that like all connected by umbilical cords, and that he did, and I appreciate that he tried to give everybody their own um, feel for their character. Like he really went in and tried his hardest with these characters to give us something different and unique with each person. Um, the constant one-liners were my biggest problem, just because it was like just so shoehorn in that I was just kind of like that felt unnecessary at
Yeah,
times.
yeah, you're not hurting for a squirting.
Yeah, and then it was just like boom, 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 boom at some parts, and it's just like was just nonstop. And but I really like it. Movies like this, you got to remember where it's coming from, and the opinions I have of this movie, are based on like what the understanding of where he was going with it by his own limitations. I think if he had like a few extra people and some,
Yeah, I mean, if
like
he had like someone just to do
budget.
the dialogue over the film besides the AI, it could have worked a little in its favor. Because again, how many films have we seen in higher budgets where they just ADR the whole thing?
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't seem like that would have been a bad thing in his regard. But again, he might have not had just a couple people to come over and do lines. Like he could have done his voice and just modulated it a few times. But again,
Yeah.
it's just with what he has to work with. And the best way, again, to get something out there is to do it yourself. And the easiest way to get something out there is to find the simplest means possible. And he did that with the AI prompts for the dialogue. And again, you make do with what you have. And again, you have to, again, really look at that and just understand the nature of the film. And like, yeah, I understand where he's coming from and the reasoning for the choices. Again, it's just sometimes the choices don't, they work, but not to the best of their abilities.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is 100% um, like if he had a budget, I think it would have done so much better. Like, it's just like I said, it's just one of those things. It's like if you get like a budget and some uh, staff would have really like made this movie shine to its full potential, and I can see the potential there, and I
Mm-hmm.
can see where he's going, and the shortcomings of the film is not a reflection of him being a bad movie director. It is just because of the limitations of resources, and that is where that's where I draw my opinions from, because that because you have to look at it for what it is and what it's trying to do and what it probably could be, and that's it's just it
Yeah,
is
because it could
a
have been really a gross
yeah it
out
could
little movie. Because if you had some, like you said, mentioned on budget, like imagine what Prudence would have looked like with like some, a little bit of makeup on her and like all the sons, like they could like have been like again a little mongoloid looking a little bit maybe, um, and like unkept and just like dirty and filthy with like again a little bit of goo for the umbilical cord still, and it could have been like a really sort of gross out little movie. Uh,
yeah
but as it it's still kind of it tried with like you could have had some of the dialogue work with like having like all these personalities with like how they look like that two and two those two shouldn't mix but yet like it should work because like they're all outlandish and it's just sort of like it'd be like that goofy gross out type of horror.
yeah no 100%, and I think if you know just with a little bit of a budget and everything else, and was really this just movie could have just been something way different, and this is why I'm glad that he went ahead and made this, because he can show us what he is capable of with what he has. And I hope that in the future he can go on like Indiegogo or something like that, and um, get a project going, and you know have it get it like financially back, so he can give his movies a little bit more oomph, even if he does it himself again. Like, I think that would have been, it's not necessarily terrible, you know, but
No.
hire people to voice over instead of just relying on AI, because that just comes out. It was just so emotionless and flat that I
And
get it just
sometimes like it went over lines too, whereas like it's supposed to be like a stop, dead stop, and it just like kept going.
yeah. And there's websites out there like Casting Call. if you have a project like that, if you, maybe if he wants to try this again with a one man show and he just wants to go on casting call, there's people on there willing to do it for free. And, you know, but not everybody knows about all this kind of stuff. So, but, I don't want him to listen to us and feel like, we're harping on him for something that he cannot control. And, that's why I'm kind of giving this, kind of information out just in case he is listening and be like, hey, look, this is what you can do, and you can still stay within a budget. It's good. It's what it is. And I hope to see more from him in the future.
Yeah, that's always the thing. You always want to see him go on and like, just like, even even if he just wants to go. I mean, I know you already made it, but like again, with a little bit more budgeting, doesn't that stop people from remaking their own film and do it over again? Like
Yeah,
that happens a lot in the indie circuit where like, okay, I didn't manage to do what I needed the first time because of limitations, and now there's a little bit of budget behind me. Now I can go out and accomplish what I intended to set out to do in the first place. Get the goal more closer to the ball closer to the finish line than it was previously.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's a perfectly fine little film. I mean, you just have to have that mindset that you are not walking into and this is not your type. This is DIY indie. This is, like I said, this is the epitome of DIY. Just one person, one camera, one idea. And again, those don't come around that often. Like I said, Nazi Zombie Carnage, way back when we reviewed that film and that came out, we're just like, it's that passion project of just one person and one idea and just getting it out there, no matter the limitations or the struggles at hand. And again, you have to give him, a round of applause for getting it out there. And again, I'm not, I'm glad to support this film, like, because that's what I always do. I always like to support the indie stuff. And Ian knows this since we began the show.
Yeah.
That's one thing he's learned about me over the years. There's a lot of stuff out there that I buy that like no normal person should buy. But I have an asphyxiation and a passion for horror. Just, I love the genre and everything that it encompasses. And this is, again, the things that I always went towards. It's just this low budget, indie horror passion projects, because it's just, there's a lot of heart and dedication and time, and it's like One Last Stop in a Violent Town. That was, again, 3 hours or 2 hours and a half, and it's just like people in Philadelphia just coming together making a movie. No one knows about it, but like it's just like this big, passion project that no one ever knows about. And that's the thing with this, is just like, it's a passion project. It doesn't have the recognition. It's under the radar, but there might be people out there like myself that really supports the low budget stuff that might be interested, as I was, and wants to give it some time. And hopefully there's might be a few people going out there and they purchase a copy and get Tyler to support him and his future endeavors. And that's kind of the reason we do the indie shows anyway, is to like, hey, go out, show the indie directors some love, if it's your type of thing. Like I said, this is a very minute type of thing, because again, not a lot of people like the green screen horror type films. So
Yeah.
you really have to be dedicated and understanding of the situation and the budget, the lack of budget that films like this have. And if that's your type of thing, go out, pick up a copy on Etsy, support Tyler, and come back, give us your thoughts. Like, hey, I wouldn't have known about this if it wasn't for you guys. I went out and supported, got a copy. Let us know. I'd love to hear back. And Ian, is there any final thoughts before we call this a show?
I don't think so. I think we got everything that we need to get out.
Yeah. I didn't really want to go too deep into spoilers. I think we did enough. I mean, it's hard not to spoil it because there's not much it's kind of the main central plot point of the film. But um, but yeah, that's going to do it for Tyler Deadend's Umbilicult. Um, as always, Ian, it's great talking with you and watching these bizarre films that horror has to offer, especially indie horror. We have one final show left to conclude our Independence Horror Marathon, and we have another one uh, that came from Etsy. So be on the lookout for that as we close out our marathon here later next episode, later in the week, I meant. And as always, I appreciate everyone for listening, and we will see you next time here on Horror Night Oasis.
Good night, everyone.